With his mobility severely reduced, Henry began to gain weight at an alarming rate. His waist, once a trim 89 centimeters, expanded to more than 130 centimeters. At more than 180 kilograms, he became so obese that special systems were created to move him between royal apartments, and palace door frames had to be widened to accommodate his size. In the final years of Henry VIII's life, the once powerful monarch, revered as one of Europe's most handsome princes, faced an excruciating and grotesque end. Born on June 28, 1491, Henry ascended to the throne at just 17, celebrated for his athletic build, golden red hair, and majestic presence. He was described as having an extraordinary figure and angelic looks, superior to any other Christian prince. Yet this embodiment of virility and power would descend into unimaginable suffering. By the time of his death, Henry's body had transformed into a grotesque sight. His legs, covered in open, festering ulcers, emitted an unbearable odor that could be detected even 3 rooms away. The king, once a majestic ruler, became a prisoner of his own decaying flesh. After his death, his coffin leaked fluids that stray dogs lapped up, further humbling the mighty king. This tragic end stands as a stark contrast to his early years of beauty and strength, leaving one to wonder how such a powerful figure could meet such a humiliating fate. Henry VIII's death serves as a grim reminder of the frailty of the human body and the inevitable decay that even the most powerful rulers cannot escape. In January 1536, during a jousting tournament in Greenwich, a single tragic accident would change the course of Henry VIII's life. At 44 years old, the once unstoppable king suffered a brutal fall when his horse collapsed on top of him. Unconscious for 2 hours, Henry survived, but the injury to his right leg would haunt him for the rest of his days. The wound became an open ulcer that never healed, constantly separating, exhaling a fetid odor that preceded him wherever he went. This humiliation was an unbearable blow to a king so concerned with his appearance and power. His courtiers were forced to endure the smell, lest they incur his wrath for showing any signs of disgust. But the toll of this injury was not just physical. The trauma seemed to ignite a shift in Henry's behavior. Coinciding with the injury came the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, under false charges of adultery and treason. Some historians argue that the brain injury exacerbated Henry's already growing paranoia and fits of rage, leading to his increasingly erratic actions. With his mobility severely reduced, Henry began to gain weight at an alarming rate. His waist, once a trim 89 centimeters, expanded to more than 130 centimeters. At more than 180 kilograms, he became so obese that special systems were created to move him between royal apartments, and palace door frames had to be widened to accommodate his size. His diet, rich in red meat and poor in vegetables, was a major contributor to his deterioration. The royal kitchen records reveal that Henry consumed around 5,000 calories a day, indulging in large quantities of meat pies, wine, and beer. As his body grew heavier, so did his suffering. His leg ulcers worsened, and the treatments prescribed by his physicians, such as cauterization with hot irons, bloodletting, and the application of toxic substances like arsenic and mercury, only weakened him further. Over time, the wounds became so severe that bones were visible beneath the rotting flesh. The smell became unbearable. His presence could be detected from 3 rooms away, a stark contrast to the powerful figure he had once been. Henry's physical decline was matched by his mental deterioration, as the king who had once been the picture of strength and vitality was now reduced to a prisoner of his own failing body. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. At the age of 49, Henry VIII married Catherine Howard, a 19-year-old beauty. He saw this union as a return to his youth, but the reality was far from romantic. The stark contrast in their ages, combined with Henry's increasingly deformed and foul-smelling body, made their marriage a grotesque spectacle. Catherine, unable to endure her husband's physical decline and revolting odor, sought comfort in the arms of a young courtier. When their affair was discovered, Henry's wrath was swift and merciless. He ordered both Catherine and her lover to be executed. In 1543, Henry's final marriage was to Catherine Parr, a union far more political than romantic. Catherine was not driven by love but by duty. She took on the role of a nurse, caring for the dying king with a surprising level of dedication, especially considering the tragic fates of Henry's previous wives. Her compassion for the weakened and ailing king stood in stark contrast to the earlier marriages marked by power struggles and personal betrayals. Catherine's devotion to Henry in his final years may have been motivated by necessity, but it also revealed a side of him that had long since faded from public view, one of vulnerability and dependence on those around him. In the final years of his life, Henry VIII was a shadow of the powerful king he once was. Modern experts believe he suffered from multiple debilitating conditions, including diabetes, severe gout, hypertension, and heart failure. Some even suggest syphilis, though this diagnosis is still debated. His body was ravaged by these illnesses, turning his remaining days into an unrelenting agony. Historical accounts reveal that Henry often shifted between moments of excruciating pain, during which he would scream and curse those around him, and deep, motionless periods of melancholy. But it wasn't just his body that deteriorated. Henry's paranoia grew stronger as his physical health declined. The once sharp and decisive monarch became obsessed with imagined conspiracies. His mind turned against even his most trusted friends and advisors, executing them without cause. Fear and suspicion ruled the court, as a misinterpreted look or a careless comment could lead to accusations of treason. In his final days, Henry ordered the execution of the Earl of Surrey, just 9 days before his own death. His fear of being poisoned became all-consuming. He implemented a strict food security system, with servants tasting every dish before it reached his table, and every utensil was meticulously inspected. This obsessive behavior may have been a sign of mental instability, possibly caused by recurring minor strokes. As the end drew near, Henry VIII's suffering reached unimaginable levels. In the final months of his life, he was barely able to move, even with help. Gangrene had set into his legs, and the already unbearable odor from his decaying body intensified. The royal court, once a place of power and grandeur, now became filled with whispers and a stench so foul that courtiers were forced to cover their noses with perfume-soaked handkerchiefs, enduring the smell just to stay in the king's presence. By the winter of 1546 to 1547, Henry's health deteriorated rapidly. He battled recurrent fevers, likely caused by septicemia due to the numerous infections in his body. Breathing became a struggle, and episodes of delirium became frequent. During these dark moments, witnesses reported that the king would often mumble the names of his deceased wives, particularly Jane Seymour, who had died after giving birth to his only legitimate son, Edward. Some even said that the ghost of Anne Boleyn, his second wife whom he had executed, haunted him in his final days. Despite his terminal condition, no one dared speak of the king's imminent death. Under English law, it was considered treason to suggest that the monarch was dying. So, the courtiers and physicians continued to pretend that recovery was possible, even as the stench of decomposition leaked from his still living body. Finally, realizing his end was near, Henry allowed Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to be called to his bedside. Unable to speak, the king squeezed Cranmer's hand when asked if he died in the Christian faith. This last conscious gesture marked the passing of the once great monarch. At 55 years old, Henry VIII exhaled his final breath in the early hours of January 28, 1547. The death of Henry VIII was as grotesque as his life was powerful. Even after passing, his dignity was stripped away in an agonizing way. Due to his immense size, a special coffin had to be made to contain his bloated remains. The embalming process, primitive by modern standards, involved removing the organs and packing the body with aromatic herbs. However, while the body waited for the state funeral, the coffin was improperly sealed, leading to a disturbing scene. Over time, decomposition leaked from the coffin, and stray dogs licked up the foul-smelling fluids, an image of degradation for a king who once embodied power and divine authority. His funeral took place on February 16, 1547, nearly 3 weeks after his death. Despite the overpowering stench emanating from his body, the ceremony was carried out with all the pomp expected for a monarch of Henry's stature. He was buried at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, beside Jane Seymour, the only wife who gave him the longed-for male heir, Edward VI. The irony wasn't lost on history. Edward, whose very existence had shaped Henry's decisions, like breaking from Rome, would rule for only 6 years before dying at 15. Henry's death marks the tragic end of an era. His transformation from a brilliant and ambitious ruler to a bloated and tormented tyrant underscores the devastating effects of unchecked power, chronic pain, and disease. Henry, who once considered himself above the law, capable of shaping England's religion and executing those who displeased him, was ultimately brought down by his own mortal body. He became a symbol of human fragility, showing that no matter how powerful, we are all subject to the ravages of time and nature. And English historian Alison Weir described it as a paradox of history, a man who began with promise, beauty, and ability, only to end as a grotesque caricature of himself. Tormented by pain and paranoia, Henry became a prisoner of his own mind. Once surrounded by sycophants and loyal followers, he died isolated in his delusions, fearful of betrayal and poisoning, ordering the execution of trusted advisors and friends. Perhaps the deepest irony in Henry's story is that, despite his desperate efforts to secure a male heir through his break with Rome and the executions of his wives, it was his daughters who would shape England's future. Elizabeth I, daughter of Anne Boleyn, would go on to create a golden age for England, whereas Henry's only son, Edward VI, died young, further illustrating the cruel twist of fate. In the end, Henry's death wasn't just the end of a man, but the symbolic collapse of an era. His body, once a symbol of power, decayed into a reminder of the fleeting nature of all earthly glory. The story of his death serves as a warning about the limitations of human power. No matter how powerful or how many lives one controls, in the end, the human body succumbs to the same fate. Henry VIII's demise is not just a story of physical decay, but a moral tale about the inevitability of mortality and the limits of absolute power.